Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to working on the 100 scale full resin God Gundam kit here. In the last episode, we are building all the Lego parts, or I should say, we're cutting up all the Lego parts to make the frame bits. And in this part, we're going to start on working on the torso. And I'm not sure how far we're going to make it, but we'll start working on the torso parts, which I have all right here for the moment. So just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to move these into a separate tray just so I can just focus on just the parts we're going to be working on now, which is the torso parts, and I can close this and put this away to the side for the time being. Just want everything to stay nice, simple, clean, neat, organized. That'll be nicer for me. Alright, so first step, we need this piece here for the back to go onto the back of the torso. You can see from the Lego part, and that's just fogged from the super glue, but not a big deal there. And this one just going to fit onto the back of here, and it fits pretty well. It's not like super flush, but I think it's plenty flush enough on there. There's a little bit of like super glue in the corner there, so actually I think what I'm gonna do is just cut away a little bit of that with my knife here, just so there's nothing really obstructing this too much. Now I actually might want to add more, well, I know I'm gonna have to glue the part eventually later anyway, but I think I might want to add, if it's like kind of fitting a little bit loosely, I might want to add a little bit more super glue again later, just to make sure that the part's fitting nice and tight. But yeah, with that removed, now it does fit more flush onto there, so that's good. So that will fit fine, but we need to also just clean this part up, and I'll have to do a little bit of sanding, but this is kind of not really a part that's going to really be like much visible, much is there on the back, and we're going to be putting the backpack onto here, so not really needing to do a ton of cleanup on here. But we need this peg sticking out the bottom, but that's also a gate there that we can just cut that off up there as well, but we're not cutting off the whole thing, is what I mean to say. There we go. That's cleaned up well enough, and I think that's the only gate we have on this part. All these other parts are actual bits that we need for plugging different things onto this. So again, this is just going to go on there like that, and then later in the next step, or in like the following step, we have this piece which will fit up onto here and plug into that in the back there. So you can see like that will plug into here to give us this section around the body like that. And then also this part on the front, here we go. This one here, which will hold the clear piece there in the center, obviously. This one's going to plug here on the front, and this is molded in a way that it fits around this Lego piece here. So that will just fit on that, and this one is a little bit snug, so I think I need to file that a little bit. See here on the top, you can see it should be fitting a little bit more snug there, but it's kind of popping out a little bit there at the top, so I want to clean that up a little bit, just because we want everything to make sure, just want to make sure everything's fitting as clean as possible. So okay, now that's fitting on there really well, and it's looking good. I also cleaned up the gate that was on the top of there also. And at this point, what you could do is basically just kind of go through the process like what I'm doing right now, and just kind of cutting off like the main gates off of everything, just kind of testing the fit, making sure everything's fitting well, and then go back in and do your sanding. But I kind of just want to do it like step by step, so like this is like kind of the first few parts that go on, so now I want to do the sanding on these parts as well, which I'm just going to do a little bit of sanding with these, just some light sanding. I think I need to re-scribe out a couple of these little bits here as well, which we'll do in a second. But my point is that whenever you're going to get around to doing your sanding, whether you do it like step by step or like later on, anytime you're sanding resin, you're going to want to wear a mask. I'm just going to slip this one on. I do have another like mask that I use for painting, but this one's just kind of simple as well, just for the dust. Whereas like with painting, you're more worried about like the actual like solvent fumes. This one's not exactly fumes, you just don't want to be breathing a lot of this dust you're going to be sanding. So another option that you can do is wet sanding. That creates less dust, but when you're sanding this, let me just show you guys for an example here. You can see the dust that's creating, and that's the kind of stuff you just don't want to be breathing that in. So good to wear a mask when you're working with this kind of stuff. Now this part right here on the back, this is just filled in white from the dust from the sanding, but it also kind of helpful. You can see there's this little like notch detail right there, and then the one over here on this side. This one's like barely there, so I think I'm just gonna try to re-scribe that out just a little bit, and maybe the other one too. That's where I'm at. And also here on the front, there's supposed to be like a sharp detail around this part here, this little like triangle bit there. On this side it's not quite as sharp, so I'm gonna just rescribe that a little bit here as well. So I'm just using a 0.1 millimeter Matworks blade here for this. There we go, that's looking a little bit better there. And then for this one here at the front as well. Actually, I think I'm gonna switch to a little bit larger one here, slightly larger, a 0.15, very slightly larger scriber here for this little bit of detail. And there we have it. Now that side is matching that siding, and the trouble with this is that it's going to be kind of hard to see. So some of this you might have to go back and redo again later after the priming process. So like these little bits, these tiny little bits there on the back, because they're so small, I may have to go back and like I might want to do that even more so. But for now, you know, we'll move on doing this step, and I can just clean up some of this dust here a little bit as well. And then like, you know, after the process, the next process will be, you know, after all this is done, they need to wash the parts and prime the parts, and then after there's primer on there and you can see everything really clearly with the primer, I may have to go back and do a little bit more cleanup again as well on some of these little bits that I'm having to rescribe. But for now, at least these first three parts are sanded, fitting really well, and all good to go. Now, in the manual it says to just glue all of these, but this part here, this part which is fitting around, is actually going to be a different color, so I want to keep that separate so that I can put that on separately, I think. But this part here on the front and the back can just be painted along with the same frame color, I think. So these I'm just going to go ahead and glue into place now, because they can stay there and they're not obstructing any other parts going on later on down the process. So I'll just glue those, but this one I won't glue on quite yet because I want to be able to paint it separately. This next part then is going to be these two side parts which fit around here, and you can see they have like the holes in there for fitting onto the side of the Lego parts there, so that will fit onto there like that and there like that. And you may be thinking like, oh wait, but if you glue those on, which by the way, I was thinking about gluing these on because on the kit later, these parts are actually, these parts are just meant to be gray. Then the parts that are meant to be red on the side of the body there are separate parts that you put onto here. So these parts are just supposed to be like kind of part of the frame, so they're meant to be gray. So I'm planning on gluing these on, but then the problem is this part needs to slip up from underneath, and obviously it won't here. But I think what we can do, it looks like, if this will fit over here, you can like just slip it on here from the back, and it's a little bit tight, but that will slip on there like that, and then you can plug it up into here where it needs to be plugged in, and it should be fine like that. So we will be able to keep this as a separate piece that I don't need to glue on at this time. I can paint that separately, but these side parts I can glue on, so we need to just get these cleaned up so they're fitting. As you can see, there's a little bit of gap here in the front that shouldn't be there on the back. I mean, the fit is kind of fine, but we can clean that up a little bit, I think, and there's just some gates and everything. These bits sticking out down the bottom here are just gates from the resin pouring, so we can just go ahead and cut those off here as well. So now that we got those as much better fit on there, they'll just fit together like that. And then we have this little piece here on the back which will fit onto here. Now these parts, like I said, are going to be gray. This little piece is going to be red, so I'll keep this together, or I'll keep it separate, and I won't glue it on there right now, but as you can see, that'll just fit right onto the here, onto the back. Later on, once it's painted, it'll just fit there onto the center of the back there. The little tramp stamp spot there. Then of course we have the parts here, like I said, that are going to be attaching onto the side, so they'll just fit right onto the side like that. Obviously I have to cut the little tab off there, as well as this part here, which I need to go ahead and glue these parts on, but this part here, which will attach onto the front lower section here, onto there, like that. Now I think I might need to whip out the tack to start tacking these parts together, because honestly I don't really need to see how they're gonna look together. I just need to check, make sure like the fit is okay, then that's fine, then I can just like put it to the side. But just to be able to see how the parts are gonna look when they all just put together like this, it would be cool to just see that, and it's kind of hard to do that without gluing them, and I'm not gonna glue them till after I paint them, so we need to just get all the tack so we can just glue, just attach some of these, so just so we can see how it's gonna look. Oh, oops, I'm noticing on the previous step we were supposed to add this part here on the top as well, and I forgot to put this on there. So basically, as you can see, this is made like to fit around these parts here very nicely. So you can just pop this on, and it is a bit snug on here, and you can see on the back there it doesn't like line up super quite right, or you can see push it down here on the front and that pops it up here in the back. But it's kind of, we push it on there, it's held on there pretty well, so I'm going to try to sand that a little bit just to get that fitting a little bit better. But the point is, can we put on the side parts around it? So like this is the side part here, it's going to go around that. So if we put this on here, you can see it'll plug into all those parts, and again it's a little bit tight, but once that's glued on there, you can see everything is going to fit fine once it's all glued. It doesn't really matter that those are like have like that kind of a little bit of separation between those, because the backpack is going to be plugged onto there, and then here on the front we've got some other parts that are going to go around in there too, but like the line between there just being a little crack, or this little bit of separation between those parts, like that is fine. That's not going to be a problem. But what I have started to notice, which I didn't notice on the first few parts, but now I'm noticing now, is we are finding some bubbles. You can see these little dots there, those are small little bubbles, and we've got a couple of those that I've been finding here. There is a much larger one. Now this one, I'll try to fill this in a little bit, but again, this is going to be covered up by the backpack, so fortunately that big bubble there is in a place where it's not really going to matter too much, but I will just try to fill that in a little bit. So that's a pretty big one. The other problem is that for like on this piece here, we have a really tiny bubble, but it's right here at the very tip of this part here on the front of the chest that's supposed to be sharp. So can you guys see that there, that tiny little pinhole right at the very end? Obviously it's really small, but when the kit's painted, I'm just worried about how that's gonna look, because it's right there at the very tip of this piece, unfortunately, like that. So it just kind of destroys the very little sharp point this is supposed to have at the end. And unfortunately, it's the same thing here for this part on the front of the chest. This is like the gold part that goes in the front of the chest. You can see there's a little bubble in here on this part as well. So that'll definitely need to be filled in there as well. And then this is the part underneath there. So basically it's the two parts here that make up the part of the chest that will open up to show in like the little green jewel inside there. So the yellow and the blue part there. These are two separate pieces, which is nice. I don't need to mask anything. I'll be able to paint them separately, but they don't fit together quite right. You can see they're just not fitting together quite right. And what I figured out was that it's just kind of tight. I need to kind of squeeze it to get that popped in there, and then it's a nice good fit between the two of them. But if I let go, it pops out again straight away. So I can glue that, and the glue should hold it, but I would just be worried later about it if it pops out again or something. So what I'm going to try to do is heat this up and then just try to just bend the resin in a little bit, because what it is just bowed out a little bit too much, and just need to bend it in a little bit so that it fits better into this space here. So you can see there's like these teeth which fit together like that, but this one just doesn't quite fit into there as it needs to. So if we can bend that in, it should be fine. Anyway, and then to fix those little holes, so there's a couple little tiny holes here on these parts on the side as well. Like this one's unfortunately got 3 little holes, one there, a little tiny one there, and then a little bit larger one there as well. So for the little tiny ones, I'll like these, I'll just put a little bit of super glue on them, drop the super glue on there a little bit, let that dry, sand that down, and it should be enough. For like the larger one on this part here on the back, I think I'll maybe have to fill that in with some epoxy putty, and that should maybe work a little bit better, but that'll take longer to cure though, so I'll have to give that a day or two to get like really fully cured. Alright, well, actually I decided to just roll up a little bit of the sticky epoxy putty, and really only need a little tiny bit of that. Even this little bit is going to be surely more than I need. And again, just having a little water on hand is helpful, just to help deal with that so it's not getting too sticky. And I'm just gonna use this for filling all these bits. On this piece, which I was mentioning before, had 4 little holes in it. It actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little tiny holes in there. So I'm just going to try to work this in to those holes there, and I'm definitely going to have to rescribe some of these lines and stuff in here as well. So definitely going to need a little bit more work on these, so we won't be able to finish these parts up like today, getting them ready. I have to give this epoxy some time to dry, do a little bit more cleanup, then some priming, then probably a little more cleanup after that to be sure. So gonna be a little bit of a process. Okay, so shortly later, I've got all the epoxy putty worked into the holes there, I think, pretty well. In retrospect, I think probably next time I'll just stick to just using regular putty. But the problem was that, like, for like the part there for like the tip of that, where I needed to reshape the sharp point of that, otherwise I just would have had like the hole sticking out at the end. I think epoxy putty would be better for that, but other small little holes, but I'd probably just use regular putty. I don't know, what do you guys think? Alright, anyway, moving on though, as much as we can at least move on for the time being. I need to finish up those parts, but I need the putty to cure until tomorrow. So like this little neck piece here just fits right over the little Lego piece there, like that. Fits very tightly, actually really well on there. We have this Lego piece here, which is a ball joint, which will go up for connecting the head. He had to cut a little bit off the bottom of that, but once you do that, and even with cutting a little bit off that, it still seems a little bit too high, so I'm thinking we're probably going to need to cut that a little bit more, but we'll see if the joint up inside the head is really that high up in there. But there's that, and yeah, the side part of here, which doesn't have putty on it at the moment, we'll pop this on here to the other side. That one will go on there, and this one is a little bit not fitting quite as well, so I think I'll try to go in and see if I can clean that up a little bit to get this one fitting a little bit better. But we've got these tiny little pieces which will go in here for like the barrels here on the front of the chest, but I don't want to put those in all the way. I'll keep those out to paint separately, and that'll be something that I'll like put in much later. Then we got this little piece here which fits over the top of that, something like that, and as you can see it's kind of like popping apart. But you just need to hold it together a little bit here. And then this little piece here as well, which will fit up underneath here. I think I grabbed the right one, didn't I? Yeah, there we go. Fits up underneath there like that. So you got a separate piece on the top and a separate piece on the bottom, and the vent is obviously a separate piece here as well. The vent has some putty on it because it had a pinhole on the top of there as well. But you can see how those are going to be fitting on there like that. So the fit of all those parts all fit fine, so I don't really need to do anything to adjust the fit on those. They're perfectly fine. I can just paint them separately and then glue them once everything's all done. So basically, just everything's just going to be all glued together later, eventually. Same thing with this part, because it's opening, it is on like a separate piece in here. And of course the little clear part there in the center also will be painted separately, and then just when everything's done, I'll just pop that into the middle there like that, but not quite yet. So basically, I mean, you can get at least a look and see how it's sort of coming together now, but I think we might as well, at this point, just move on to the head then, just so we can clean up those parts tomorrow. For the receiving end of the ball joint there in the neck, we need to cut off this Lego piece here. I'm just gonna cut that off, clean this up a little bit. And we've got basically the two main halves of the head that we're going to sandwich together like that, and then this Lego piece needs to be sandwiched up inside there, as well as this piece, this kind of like cowl piece out the back, and it says basically to just glue that up in there. So I mean, this is all going to be white, white, and white, so we can do that. We need to remove these tabs on here, of course, and get these, you know, fitting squarely and get this fitting up inside there. Alright, so let's just go ahead and do that. Alright, so as you can see now, after I've let that cure and I've sanded down the putty again, we obviously lost some of the detail, that little panel line there and like the two little like notch little lines there. So I'm going to have to rescribe those out. Now those are kind of lost from just the puttying and the sanding, so shouldn't be too difficult for that. And then a little bit on this other side of this one as well. So there's a couple of fixes on those parts. The only other part that really needs to be fixed a little bit then here too is the chest vent, the pinhole that was on the top of there is right like in the middle of that, kind of this little detail there at the top of that. So we'll have to scribe that a little bit here as well. So I'm just using some of this like thick scribing tape, and there's like a bunch of different brands make it. God Hand makes some, other different brands also, and there's just like Dymo tape. Any of this like thick scribing tape you can usually find made by different companies. Just kind of makes it helpful for a good guide for scribing, of course, here. So let's go ahead and you can just stick it on there. And there we go. Looks like I think it's going to be good as new, but again, once we get it all washed up and primed, we may have to go back in and do a little bit more cleanup work or something. We'll find out, but for the time being, looks pretty good. And then after we can do a little bit more of the assembly, at least just for the time being, it's kind of like if I breathe on this wrong, pieces are going to fall off. Nothing's really stuck on there, or a few pieces aren't really stuck on there anyway. But you can see just the pieces of the head now coming together after we glued those main pieces. Basically the faceplate just sits in there, and then this part just sits on the top of there. Again, just that'll be glued later. But basically, before we finish up for this work in progress, this comes now the most dreaded part that I've not been looking forward to, is for the parts for the V-fin. The two V-fins we have to worry about, and they're very thin and fragile pieces that I had to be super careful with because I'm really afraid of breaking them. I'm gonna do my best, and hopefully we can avoid any tragedy, which wouldn't be, I mean, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. You can fix it well enough, and probably what I would do if these end up breaking is just remake them with a plot plate or something, I suppose, but hopefully it won't come to that. I'm trying to cut off this section here in a way that I think will make the least pressure on these areas, so I'm just like cutting it down a little bit closer and closer. Hopefully that'll be like the best way to go about this. Again, just to try to make the least amount of pressure on those connections to the V-fin. Phew, what it looks like. For now, it's been crisis averted, and they're sharp and very thin. I'm 90% certain that somewhere along the lines, probably I'm going to end up breaking one of those. I'm going to have to be super careful with those parts not to break those V-fins because it's just so thin. So like through the cleaning and painting process, everything, I just need to be really super careful with those. But there is the head, at least for the time being, all sort of put together. I need to work on, I think, like the top parts, there's a little bit of gap there. I'll try to get those fitting a little bit more tightly. But that's going to be it for this work in progress video. And the next work in progress video will start maybe on the legs or arms, either one. I think we do arms next to the manual. So we'll just follow the manual and do arms next. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.